and through the
Friends,
drifts,
you can
the
give
snowy
Wall of Ice
cliffs
Cream
descend with
$8
dismal
just by
sheen.
entering in this
Nor
code and
shapes of
subscribing to
men,
Humble
nor
Monthly.
beasts
The
we
code is
ken. The ice was
YM2B9L.
all
What is Humble
between.
Monthly? Well,
Hey
it's a
guys,
great place
Vintage
to be,
Cube,
all the way until
you
January
get a bunch
17th.
of games.
A
ton of
I've been
games.
watching a lot of Vintage Cube with
so
Frank
many
Lepore.
games.
He's been saying things like,
I don't want to get into it.
you know, second or third tier Power 9 is
Yeah.
Mana Drain, or Time Twister isn't really a Power 9 card. So I'm here to clear things up and get some stuff off my chest. I'm here with another top 10, this week's top 10. Top 10 Power 9. Well, there's 9 pieces of the Power 9. So how can you make a top 10 out of that? I'll get to that. The Power 9 came out back in Alpha 1993. Designed by Richard Garfield. He made a pre-alpha version, made 4 copies of each version of the alpha cards and handed them out to players. Wonderful video where someone traded a Mox Emerald for a Forest because he thought it did the same thing. The worst trade in the history of Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering's YouTube page. I want to talk about the Power 9 in terms of the very first major Magic the Gathering event with 4cc and 5cc decks. And that, what I mean by that is 4cc is 4-color control and 5cc is 5-color control. I saw one 5-color control deck, and I don't know how many 4-color control decks there were. But the point of those kind of decks is to try to make the most of your pieces of Power 9. The Power 9 is 5 Moxes, Black Lotus, and then 3 blue cards costing 1, 2, and 3 mana. There's Ancestral Recall, it costs 1, Time Walk costs 2, and Time Twister costs 3. And if you add all that up, that's 9 pieces of the Power 9. So let's go over just the pecking order of the Power 9. Since you guys already know what the Power 9 is, this list is more or less fact. It's the factual opinion of the Magic the Gathering crowd. So without further ado, let's go over the Power 9. Starting with number 10, Library of Alexandria, the honorary member of the Power 9. It's the honorary member because all 9 pieces of the Power 9 come from Alpha Beta Unlimited. And the Library of Alexandria comes from a later set. It's Arabian Nights. It taps, add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or draws a card from your library. You can use this ability only if you have exactly 7 cards in your hand. So it's 2 abilities. One's a mana ability, one's a draw a card ability. It's an honorary member because it doesn't really do what the other Power 9 does. The Power 9 is supposed to accelerate and encourage turn 1 wins. Library of Alexandria discourages turn 1 wins. And actually, you spend your first turn drawing a card. So I had an argument with someone whether Library of Alexandria was good or not. I own 2 libraries. I paid $160 each for them. Wonderful card. As far as pieces of Power 9, I owned Ruby, Sapphire, and Jet. And my dad owned Mox Pearl for a little while. Sold them all. Wonderful cards. Didn't play them for long enough, I'm afraid. So moving on to the Power 9, Time Twister. The weakest piece of the Power 9. There's cards like this. There's Wheel of Fortune's red 2. Each player discards his or her hand and draws 7 cards. Time Twister is almost the same thing. It's you discard your hand and then shuffle your graveyard into your library and draw 7 cards. So it has this close relative, which is why it's the 9th. I wouldn't be surprised if the reserve list got cancelled, that Time Twister would be the first card in the reserve list to be reprinted. I honestly don't think it would be that broken if Time Twister got reprinted. It's actually not that powerful. It is really expensive though. The best part about Time Twister is it's the only card in the Power 9 that's not banned in Commander. I'm surprised more people don't put Time Twister in their decks. I do see Time Twister in the Nekazar decks. But as far as power level, you need 3 mana. This could actually tap you out, and then if you pass with Time Twister, then your opponent has 7 fresh cards, and which they could actually kill you with. So whoever casts Time Twister on turn 3 ends up losing if you tap out with Time Twister. So you need to compare it with some other cards. Coming at number 8, Mox Emerald, the weakest of the 5 Moxes. It's the weakest because Birds of Paradise exists. Birds of Paradise is 1 green. It taps for 1 mana of any color in your mana pool. Birds of Paradise was a mistake. It was supposed to be Tropical Island. But for whatever reason, they didn't like the picture or something, and they made a different card be Tropical Island. So now Richard Garfield was left with a beautiful picture, decided just to make a card around it, called it Birds of Paradise. My personal opinion, I think Birds of Paradise is better than Mox Emerald because Birds taps for any color and Mox just taps for 1. Mox Emerald's also at the bottom of the Mox list because there just isn't that many restricted cards you can cast with this Mox. So the pecking order of these Moxes is basically how many restricted cards of that color there were in 1993-94. And Mox Emerald, there's just Fast Bond. Mox Ruby's 4th, coming in at number 7. Fourth strongest Mox because once again there's not that many restricted cards. There is Wheel of Fortune, but there's also Red Elemental Blast, and Red Elemental Blast is powerful back in 93-94 because you could counter a counter spell and you'd only have to tap a Mox Ruby for it, whereas the other counter spells such as Mana Drain and Counterspell, you'd have to tap 2 mana for it. So if you could Red Elemental Blast a counter spell, you could get yourself some mana advantage and actually win the counter war. So 4cc decks would be every Mox except for Mox Emerald, basically, and then 5cc decks would be all the Moxes, including Mox Emerald. Coming in at number 6, Mox Pearl. White is the 3rd strongest control color. White has Armageddon, it has Wrath of God, it has Disenchant. So Armageddon destroys all lands, Wrath of God destroys all creatures, and Disenchant destroys all artifacts and enchantments. So you have the entire destructive package, in Mox Pearl. So if you have a 3-color deck, 3-color control, it would have Mox Pearl in it. That's plain and simple. 4-color also has Mox Pearl in it. There's Land Tax, which is beautiful turn 1 play. You can play Mox Pearl Land Tax, and your opponent has to play Magic the Gathering. So it basically is a war of like who has the most Moxes. I can just play Mox Pearl Land Tax, and you have to play a land. And if your opponent does play a land, it's Land Tax is like an Ancestral Recall. You get to draw 3 cards. I adore Land Tax. That's just such a wonderful card to me. I probably overvalue it. It's a pet card of mine. Number 5, Time Walk. Take an extra turn after this one. Well, you might be saying, why isn't Time Walk, number 1? This you can get, you do half the damage to your opponent. Time Walk, do the other half of your damage to your opponent. He's dead. Well, Time Walk gets into this trap where it's frequently an Explore. Explore is a card for green, 1 colorless. You can play an additional land this turn, draw a card. And that's if you don't play any Moxes, you just do turn 1 land, turn 2 land, Time Walk. That's not very exciting because you just turn 3, you draw a card, and you play a land, which is exactly what Explore does. So Time Walk does get the nickname Explore sometimes. So that's why it's at number 5. Number 4, Mox Jet, the 2nd most powerful control color. There's a lot of restricted cards in black. There's Necropotence. There was Yawgmoth's Will. Now it's an unrestricted. There's Demonic Tutor. There's Vampiric Tutor. And the Demonic Tutors and Vampiric Tutors don't cost that much. Vampiric Tutor costs 1 black. So you can just tap a Mox Jet for it. And you can set up next turn for any 2 or 3 card infinite combo. Usually 2 cards for Vintage. And that's why Mox Jet's just so powerful. Especially if you get a turn 2 Necropotence with Mox Jet and Swamps. It's usually just over. You can draw 7 or 8 or 9 cards with Necropotence on turn 2. And a turn 3 win is usually good enough in Vintage. Also, Mox Jet, you can cast a Dark Ritual off it, or and then maybe a Cabal Ritual after that, and cast Doomsday and just win the game. That's why Mox Jet is so high at number 4. Number 3, Mox Sapphire. Blue is the most powerful control color. Blue also has a lot of restricted cards. We actually talked about 2 of them already. Time Twisters restricted in Vintage. Time Walks restricted in Vintage. And you'll find number 2, Ancestral Recall, is also restricted in Vintage. So a lot of restricted blue cards. Mind over matter. Time spiral. Yeah. More than that, you could do turn 1 Mox Sapphire Island, and you can hold up either a mana drain or a counter spell. And if you're going first, your opponent's facing a wall of counter spells starting from turn 1, and Mox Sapphire's why. So you can see why the Moxes in total are just so powerful. All 5 Moxes abuse the basic rules of Magic the Gathering, which is you can only play 1 land a turn. And the reason why 1 land a turn exists is because it's no fun if your opponent gets a turn 1 win. You don't get to play Magic the Gathering at all. Force of Will is a card that stops turn 1 wins a lot, but you need to pitch a card, Force of Will, to do that, and then after that your hand's looking pretty weak, and it's hard to finish up the game if you've cast too many Force of Wills pitching cards. Your opponent can just run you over with basically any creature because there's nothing in your hand left after Force of Wills several times. Number 2, Ancestral Recall. Not to be confused with Recall. Recall's blue XX, discard X cards, regrowth X cards from your graveyard to your hand. So it's not Recall, it's Ancestral. So its nickname's Ancestral Recall. You can draw 3 cards for 1 blue. You can force your opponent to draw 3 cards, which I guess you could do if he only has 2 cards or less or fewer in your library. Excuse me. You could mill your opponent to death and die of deck death. Yeah, it's a concentrate, which is blue, 2 colorless, draw 3 cards. Except it only costs 1 blue instead of 4. I actually have the Magic the Gathering Encyclopedia in the bookcase next to me. And Scry magazine, the writer of the Magic the Gathering Encyclopedia. I love these things. I'll just grab one. Boom. But they said, oh, the cards these days cost 3 or 4 times as much. Yeah, that's called concentrate, Scry. That's not a very thought-provoking thing to say. Number 1. What was I doing there? Black Lotus. People who don't play Magic the Gathering still know what Black Lotus is. It's the symbol of Magic the Gathering. Nintendo has Mario. Genesis has Sonic. Magic the Gathering has Black Lotus. It's so important because it just breaks all rules of Magic the Gathering with lands and mana. You get to sacrifice it for 3 mana of a single color. Either 3 white or 3 blue or 3 black or 3 red or 3 green. And that can be just the game. There isn't a way of winning Magic the Gathering by just playing land and a 1 mana spell. There's just no way of winning turn 1 that way. But if you had 4 mana, say you did land Black Lotus, then you can cast a Doomsday for 3 black mana, and you still have 1 mana left over, and maybe you can use the 1 mana left over in Dark Ritual or Cabal Ritual or something after that, and you can come up with an infinite combo that way. Turn 1. So Black Lotus is the number 1 felon, whatever you call it, into creating turn 1 broken wins in Magic the Gathering, and that's why it's the most powerful Magic the Gathering card of all. So that's the pecking order. You can see why there's 4 color control decks. You can have red elemental blasts and blue elemental blasts with your Moxes to try to fight the counterspell wars, and then the more Moxes you have, the more restricted cards you can play with those Moxes. That's basically how the pecking order is. Do you agree on this list? Do you think anything should change order? Let me know in the comments if you think so. Thanks for watching. Friends, check out humblebundle.com. You get hundreds of dollars of games for just $12 a month. It goes in your Steam account and it stays there forever. So, what I want you to do is I want you to join Humble Monthly with this code YM2B9L and support Wall of Ice Cream on his endeavors. And there will be more videos, I promise. We just need more than 0. Go for it. Do it.